this is going to be the hot take from
Here
the whole podcast.
Here we go.
I don't believe in affirmations at all. And here's why. When we say things that our brains don't believe or our hearts don't believe, we're actually causing more confusion because it causes cognitive dissonance. So our brain is saying one thing, our mouths are saying something different, and our brain's going, wait, which one's true? And so like lots of people want to say affirmations in hopes that will change the way they feel inside. But out of our hearts, the mouth speaks. So what you're saying has to come from the inside first.
And on that note, we're recording again. Good afternoon, Ken. How are you?
Good afternoon, Fenton. I'm doing awesome. Yourself?
I'm doing amazing now that I can see myself. We're having some technical difficulties, but we got it sorted out. Anyway, we're a little pressed for time, so we're going to get right into it. Welcome to Products of Circumstance. This is the podcast with Ken Skeen and myself, Fenton Joseph. We discuss mental health and mindset matters through the lens of Black men. The show is unscripted, clearly unfiltered, and mostly unedited. We choose our topics mostly randomly. But today we have a guest, which we've been doing recently. So we're going to talk a little bit about her area of expertise. But before we bring her on, I want you to please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And most importantly, please share with somebody who's on their personal development journey. So today we have with us one of my best friends in the whole world, amazing human being. I'll share, like my full litany of accolades and adjectives and everything like that. But her official byline is Kiele Hauser, is a counselor at EIS Solutions. She has worked as a teacher, a pastor, and a counselor. She holds a master practitioner certificate in ELIMP. I don't know what that means, but she's going to tell us. And is a temperament counselor by the NCCA, not to be confused with the NCAA. It's a very different thing. And she's a hooper.
That's good stuff.
Welcome.
Hi.
Yeah, how you doing?
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Being here. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yes. We like to laugh, so thanks for jumping right in. I know
laughter.
We like to have a good time. So, we'll keep it lighthearted today, even though we like to talk about serious things. We like to do it in a way that's accessible to people. And, first thing I'd like for you to do is to share a little bit about your background, what you do currently, and how you help people. And then we'll jump into our topic of the day, which I'll let you introduce as well.
Okay. I mostly work with young entrepreneurs who are struggling to get ahead in their success for some reason. I help them identify limiting beliefs and areas of pain and trauma and walk them through the process of healing that in order to be able to be more productive in every area of their lives, relationships, business, family, parenting, stuff like that. I start with a temperament test, which kind of helps assess the person's individual needs and the way that they think, the way they're motivated, the way they make decisions, the way they give and receive love. And it helps us as a jump off point to understand where they're coming from so we can help them better meet their needs, better understand their needs. So that, because when our needs are not being fulfilled, we can delay our wants, but we can't delay our needs. So when those needs are not being fulfilled, it drains us of the energy we need to be able to focus on the things that are important to us. So that's what I do.
Sounds like a TED Talk.
I'm happy to do one. Call me Ted.
Absolutely. Ted is a real person.
Is he? I didn't know.
He makes all the calls.
I did not know that either.
No, he's not. Ted is not real. Ted is not going to call you. There's a website. You have to sign up, fill out an application.
Oh, I should do that.
Absolutely. All right. So that's incredible. And I know, from not only being your friend, but watching you on social media, that you do incredible work. And I'm familiar with, your work as a pastor as well. So you're definitely out here changing lives, changing trajectories, and that's powerful stuff. And why don't you tell us about the topic that you brought up today? Because it's a really juicy one.
Yeah. So something that I feel like I've been talking a lot with clients about, because of course, when we have a drive for success, we find different ways to keep ourselves motivated to accomplish that success or achieve that success. But many of us start off at the point of using shame as a motivator, or using even sometimes self-abuse as a motivator to keep ourselves moving forward. It's not good enough. It's never good enough. I should be able to do this. I should be here by now. And that's how they keep themselves going. But that kind of creates a cycle. So when I'm doing well, I'm okay. As soon as something goes wrong, I'm back into that shame cycle. And sometimes even use shame to get me out of that cycle, to go back into that cycle. And so
what does that look like?
Well, should is always attached to shame. So if I'm thinking I should be able to do something, or if I should be somewhere else in my life, I should have accomplished this goal by now, then what we're really saying at the base is I'm not enough. So I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not successful enough. That I'm not enough statement is a shame statement. And so it shows up in beating ourselves up, self-sabotage, self-criticism. And all of those things are a version of self-hate. And I know that sounds really extreme because most people wouldn't admit that they hate themselves, but it's self-hate.
All right. So go ahead, Ken.
I never related the two. It makes sense, but I never related the two with self-hate and shame. I guess shame and self, and I never put the two together. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have not as well, but that was a nice take. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that was a different take on that. That has me sitting there thinking that, like, wait.
No, interrupting is what we do here, first of all.
Yes, we do.
Because we have lots of questions. And also, like, all right, so is there like a continuum, where hate is on one end of the spectrum and, what's on the other side that people should be striving towards? I mean, I think I know the answer, but let's dumb it down for people, so to speak.
Well, I think that the natural answer you would assume is self-love. And I think that's important. But I think self-love has turned into, in our society, kind of self-indulgence and selfishness. So I would say the other side of the scale is probably healthy identity. Having a healthy understanding of who you are and what you are good at and what you're bad at, right? Healthy identity is also being aware of what you super suck at.
It's the whole picture, right? No, that's awesome, because I like to say these days, I am not interested in becoming a well-rounded person. Not at 42. Nope. I want to lean into my strengths, but I also have identified those things that I super suck at. And I'm more than capable of and willing to and happy to ask for help in those areas, so that I'm not draining myself, trying to, or investing energy in things that I'm not going to be most effective at. And obviously that's really important in business. And I know that's an area where you help people, but also in relationships, right? Like we have what do they call it? Like a community brain, so to speak. My wife is really good at certain things. I'm really good at certain things, and we lean on each other. I'm not the person who's going to help our daughter with the math homework. It's like just probably best if you don't ask me to do it. I'll get right change at the bodega. Like I'm not going to walk out of there without my 50 cents, but I'm not structured to do the teaching. My wife is incredible at that stuff. Right. Mm-hmm. And then there's other things that like I'm really good at doing, I'm strong at, and she'll just leave that to me. And I think we kind of like naturally flowed into that. So I think when you have another person or you're in like a group dynamic, it can be easy to find your place. But how do you find your place within yourself? Right. Is my question for you.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't think anybody finds that within themselves. Really, I think that's probably a spiritual journey to start. And then I also think having healthy community and people that can reflect back to us help us see that stuff. So I don't think that anybody really gets to that place of healthy identity alone, which is how I have a job, right? They come to me, I'm able to hold up a mirror, reflect those things back to them. But I also think the other part of it is going to your childhood and figuring out what limiting beliefs did I adapt in my childhood? What did my parents speak over me that maybe isn't true, but I'm believing it as true because it's my experience? What lies have my circumstances told me about what's possible in life, or what I'm good at? Like, here's a great example. I am a horrible painter or artist. Like, I mean, you don't even want to see the things that I make. They're just like, your 4-year-old, almost 5-year-old could probably do better than me.
No paint and sip nights
Real.
for you. No.
You shouldn't say that, though.
No, for real. But that doesn't mean I'm not creative. So I went most of my life thinking that I wasn't creative because of things that were over me. But I was a dancer for most of my life. I traveled with a ballet company in my young life. I'm a musician, a singer. Like, there's creative parts about me. I think I'm a pretty creative, a speaker, obviously.
Yes, new words on the spot.
But a creative, like, strategist. I like to come up with creative solutions for problems and stuff like that. So for me, that's a very simple example, but I had to reframe that in order to be able to lean into my creativity and let some of that stuff come out of me that previously had been kind of locked up, right? So I was able to access a different level of understanding of myself when I stopped believing the lie that I wasn't creative.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So coming from my background of, I had one parent that, my mother was, college, school, diplomas, nurse practitioner, midwife. My dad was blue collar entrepreneur, contractor. And so I was able to see the two different sides of success, let's say. But thankfully, I came from a healthy household, quote unquote. I mean, I do have, every parent's going to mess their kid up a little bit. You just try our hardest not to. When it comes to the clients that you have, how often do you see where their stress or their beliefs or disbeliefs in themselves come from, a background of misinformation or miscommunication from the parents or from the I guess the people in their families or friends or friend groups that they had, that has now turned them into a negative thinking individual? Like, how often do you have your clients come to you with that?
I mean, I would say everybody comes with that, with some version of that, right? So what we work through is not necessarily what our parents said or what our family members or friends said. It's more of what our perception of that was. So let's say somebody comes from a pair of parents that aren't very emotionally connected. This is a great example from my own life. My parents they don't have the capacity for like lots of big or deep emotions. And I'm a very emotional person, very passionate about the way that I express those emotions. And so when I was growing up, they were always like, okay, Kiele, stop it. Enough. Just enough, right? And so I grew up with the perception that my emotions were too much and there was something wrong with me as a result. And I had to go through the process of recognizing that my parents and I are just designed differently and they didn't know how to manage that for me. So that was my perception. It might not have been directly communicated to me, but it was indirectly communicated by the way that they engaged with my emotions. So I think everybody has a version of that where in a moment a need didn't get met. And when we're in our formative years, that translates to there must be something wrong here. Let me change the way I think about it. That's how we adapt. Our brains are always adapting to protect us from pain.
Mm-hmm.
So our brains are always going, oh, okay, when I express my emotions in that moment, I felt rejected. So maybe I should stop expressing my emotions. And then they become disconnected in adulthood. That adaptive mechanism doesn't help them anymore because now they can't, let's say, emotionally connect with their spouse or they can't emotionally connect with their children. And then there's conflict in the relationship, or then there's shame that comes along with that. I'm not good at this. I'm not enough in this area. And then perfectionism is a result of that shame. So with the example I just used, I became really good at performing. So I became really good at being the best dancer, being the best student, being the best singer, touring around the state and the country with a choir, like all the things that I could do in order to get what I thought was love. What really it was affirmation from my parents that I wasn't getting without doing those things. And so that was my adaptive mechanism that I figured out, I guess, unconsciously figured out that would get me the feedback that I wanted. So when I became an adult, I overworked, overperformed, overcommitted, and I had to go through the process of, and I'm still kind of in the process of detoxing myself from that, because while it helped me get that basic need met in childhood, it actually became destructive in my adulthood.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I think a lot of that shame-based motivation comes from. So think about it. If I go through my life thinking I'm not lovable unless I perform, then when I perform and don't get love, I go, oh, that must not have been good enough. I have to do better.
Wow.
What's my problem? And that's where perfectionism comes from. Perfectionism is a very beautiful, nice way of saying shame.
Wow. I'm sure you're going to trigger a couple people right now in a good way. I think it's healthy. Whoever getting triggered by that, it's going to be healthy to look in the mirror.
Yeah.
That's their perception.
Right.
Can I tell you this story real quick?
Shoot.
Last Sunday, today's Wednesday, this Sunday past, I was coming out of church and a young man walked up to me and asked me for some money. And I was there for a while. Apparently my wife was like in the car waiting for me. And I thought I was there for like 10 minutes talking to him. We were probably there for like 30 minutes talking. And, the conversation had a really wide range of emotions and, had quite the arc. He was upset because I told him I don't carry cash. And he took that, he was offended by that. He was like, yo, if you had just said that you don't have it, I'd be okay with that. I would have stepped off. But, telling me you don't carry cash carried a lot of implications for him. And, I must think that he's stupid and I'm trying to play him. And, there's the fact that I had just come out of church. And so I was dressed up a little bit. And, my family's sitting in the car and, we drive a fairly decent car. No. We drive a nice car. Let me stop.
You drive a nice car.
Let me give God his blessing. Okay. We drive a nice car. And he's seeing all this. So his perception of what's in front of him is this guy's got some money. And he's telling me that he doesn't have, I'm sorry, my child is here with me. School doesn't start yet. So he's telling me, oh, I don't carry cash. And I'm telling you, he was so offended by that. And it took a lot of, I'm going to say wisdom to navigate his emotions, because he also didn't seem like he was all there, like he maybe, he'd had a drink or maybe he smoked something or whatever. I'm not sure. But the ease with which he slid into like a very intense emotional state, like becoming very angered and then sliding back into, like we can talk. And then, depending on what I was saying, like I was in real time navigating his emotions. At some point, it's like, all right, let me back up because I'm not sure if this guy wants to fight me. And I'm going somewhere. What I ended up talking to him about was his perception. He saw me and he heard what I said and his brain put a narrative together. And he wasn't okay with that. And he was willing and ready to respond in a pretty aggressive, hostile way based on not what I said, but how he perceived it. All right. I'm going back to what you said, because when we're kids, I have family members who, my brothers, who grew up in the same house as you, my brothers, who they heard the same things from our parents. We had the same parents, but took it very differently and went in very different directions in terms of how they internalized it and how it, impacted their trajectory of their, their personal development. And it's really mind blowing to me that at this age, I'm just not just now, let's say a couple of years now, but really understanding that all those things really lied with me. I can't really blame my parents. I have to look at, okay, well, what did it mean to me? When they said that, what did it mean to me and what did I take it to mean? I'm regurgitating a bit of what you said already, Kiele, maybe for people who need to hear it in a different way. That's very meta, but it's something that I take with me in my professional life, in my marriage, my parenting style. When I talk to my daughter and I talk to my wife about how we raise our daughter, I'm like, okay, well, when we say something to her, like, what is that actually telling her? Because what we're telling her is not what we're telling her. What we're telling, there's something that she's going to get out of it that we're not exactly sure of. And we need to be really mindful of how we say the things that we say, because, and I'm not trying to be like super poetic or anything, but I guess I am at the same time. Like, what you say is not what people hear. Y'all, for everyone who's listening, I'm not talking to Kiele and I'm not talking to Ken. I'm talking to you who's listening. What you say is not always what people hear. And it's going to impact them like deep in their soul in a way that you can't yet comprehend. It's like very butterfly effect, the power that words have. And, I keep bringing up this book, The Four Agreements. I'm sure you know of it, Kiele. Mm-hmm. Because that shit. Oh, come on, baby. All right. I'm just going to ignore that. That showed me that I needed to kind of rewind the tape. It's not funny. It feels like I'm like a bad parent, but like, she's smiling. She knows. I had to rewind the tape on my childhood and say to myself, am I actually like upset with my parents about what they said? Or have I just not been aware of how I perceived it and what I decided to do with it? And also knowing that I'm empowered to move differently now. I can rewrite the whole script. I have this programming in me, but it was based on a narrative that I created, and I now get to rewrite that. And something that may have seemed negative can be like, or like, debilitating, can actually become very empowering. It doesn't have to be, I'm not good enough. It can be, they didn't think I was good enough, but I was the whole time. And now I get to build off of that. I've done a lot. I'm going to be quiet after this. Promise. I'll stop talking for a while. I have gone back in time and I have rebuilt confidence. Mm-hmm. I've built upon confidence that should have been there. And I because I had the wrong narrative, I was like, there's things about me that I don't like or whatever. It's like, well, no, now I love those things. Just like you talked about your emotions, I was crying with that kid on the street the other day on Sunday. I was out in the street with somebody crying because I have big emotions too. Like I'm a person who like, I let my emotions, really let them rip. And we got into a conversation and I started, talking to him about my experiences that kind of paralleled his. And next thing you know, like I'm in tears. And he hugged me. He was consoling me. Like he wanted to fight me one second. The next second he's consoling me and we're hugging it out. We must have hugged like 3 times. And it was a beautiful exchange. And it was only because I was able to access those emotions that I also thought was like, oh, like I feel too much. My emotions are too big. No, it's my superpower actually. And now I have a new narrative and it helps me to touch people. So that's my contribution for this day, for this conversation.
I love that. I think that one of the reasons why people, first of all, what you just described is called reparenting in the psychology world. So it's the idea that you go back into the childhood scripts and the childhood memories and like address the little child in you and say, actually, you are worthy. You are lovable. Your emotions aren't too much. They're just right. And you start to give comfort to those painful places. Because when we get triggered or when we have big feelings or emotions about something, it's usually rooted in the past. So I learned this in undergrad. They say, if it's hysterical, it's historical. So if our reaction to something is disproportionate to the situation, then it's almost always rooted in the past. It's almost always rooted in a past trauma, a past area of neglect or abandonment, a belief system. And so we have to go back to those places and start reparenting or changing those scripts so that we can bring that hurt little child into the present and reintegrate the adult and the child brain. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Fenton, we can't hear you.
Of course not. I'm the tech guy.
No.
I'm pretty sure reparenting is the term that was used in the book, in the 4 Agreements as well. And I love that term because, you know, when you're the parent, right, you're the one kind of driving things, you're kind of running the show, right? So I found it to be very empowering. It's like I get to re-inform myself. I get to tell myself a new story. I get to tell myself how great I am. And it's not that my parents didn't tell me certain things. Well, no, that's not true, actually. But that's a whole other episode. But being empowered to decide how I view myself is everything.
Yeah.
That takes time, though. It takes and healing, because my wife is the one that she went to school for forensic psychology, and in those courses she learned about, you know, the way people think, and she's the one that actually helped me open up to, you know, my past history through family. I didn't come from a bad home, something like that, but there were certain things, just like any person goes through from their guardians, their parents, whatever it may be, that affects them later on in life. Like, thank you, you guys are saying right now, it affects you. You don't realize it affects you until you get older and you start to open your mind and start to reflect on who you were as a child and who you are as an adult. And I see it more as we raise our children. You know, we have 4 children. So as we raise them, I do, in my head, I hear my parents come out. But then when I speak, I change the narrative of what was taught to me to reflect, so that I'm not endangering my children and they're not as messed up. Because again, every parent's we're gonna mess our children up a little bit sometimes. We don't mean to do it, but it's gonna happen. But I try to just change it a little bit, so that, like Fenton was saying, what you say and what someone else hears are 2 different things. So we may sound like loving people, and, you know, people will call it tough love, but someone else will take that as, you know, a defensive.
Yeah. Well, and also it depends on their temperament too. So, like, if a child is an especially tender-hearted child, sensitive child, it's very easy to offend them, even when you're joking around or you say something in a lighthearted way. And if your child is not as gentle-hearted and not as sensitive, you can say things like that and they'll laugh at it and they'll have fun with it. And so the way they internalize it really depends on their bend toward certain perspectives and certain needs and stuff like that. So, like, as an example, I would say that while I do have a lot of emotions, and I can be very warm and tender, I wouldn't call myself very sensitive. So I could take a little bit of something without taking it personally. But let's say somebody else in my family might have been much more sensitive. And so what they heard might have been much worse than what I heard. And that's why, Fenton, you were saying, like, everybody in the family experiences things differently because everybody is built differently. They're designed differently. I wouldn't say that, like, I have a sister that I'm really close with, and I wouldn't say that she's as emotionally sensitive in a lot of ways as I am. But in other ways, she's much more sensitive than me that I sometimes don't even realize because I'm not the same as she is. And so I have to be mindful of that. And of course, parents don't always do a perfect job at that. You know, my sister comes to me and says, I'm so scared I'm going to mess up my children. And I'm like, I assure you already have. It's inevitable, right? You could be the best parent in the world, but it's inevitable that you're going to do something. And people are naturally, unfortunately, for many reasons, people are naturally prone to feeling shame, especially in their formative years. And if we don't deal with that in our childhood, we use that shame to, like, beat ourselves into submission in adulthood rather than learning to, like you said, reparent, change your identity, give yourself grace. You know, maybe today wasn't a great productive day, but tomorrow will be. You did a good job for getting out of bed and getting it through your day today. Let's see what we can do better tomorrow, rather than, you're an idiot. What's wrong with you? Do better. Get it together. Why can't I be consistent in these habits? What's my problem? Like, all those statements are shame statements, and we all use them all the time. We have to learn how to speak to ourselves differently, because our words have power,
Absolutely.
and our thoughts have power. I think that, like, we could say whatever we want to say. This is why I don't believe this is going to be the hot take from the whole podcast.
Here we go.
I don't believe in affirmations at all. And here's why. When we say things that our brains don't believe or our hearts don't believe, we're actually causing more confusion, because it causes cognitive dissonance. So our brain is saying one thing, our mouths are saying something different, and our brain's going, wait, which one's true? And so, like, lots of people want to say affirmations in hopes that will change the way they feel inside. But out of our hearts, the mouth speaks. So what you're saying has to come from the inside first. So when people say, oh, I'm doing my affirmations, I always say, okay, are you visualizing them? Are you feeling what it feels like to be that person? Are you imagining what it's like to live to be that person? Because if you're not, then they're useless. That'll go viral for you.
I don't know if I would call it a hot take. I think that you have to. It's multifaceted. I don't have the vocabulary to describe the other aspects. That actually make affirmations effective. I do believe that you have to visualize it. We say on my other podcast. I have another podcast. Dream it, believe it, go out and get it. And the dream it part is like, that's the visualization, right? It's like you have to see it first. I always say that my parents, we grew up in Long Island, and what they would do is they would take us across the street. We lived in a pretty nice neighborhood, but across the street were like all the millionaires lived over there, right? Like they were balling out.
Yeah.
And they would take us in the car and we'd go drive around that other neighborhood, and we'd see these giant houses with like acres of land and whatever. And it's like, all right, boom. So you're telling me across the street from where I live, like I could walk over there. They're balling. I see it. The neighborhood that I live in now is like, there's hedge fund people, it's $5, $6, $7, $8 million homes, water's down the street. Like I ride my bike around here and it's like, I don't have an $8 million house, but I'm looking at one. I can go knock on their door. I talk to these people. They're my neighbors. So first I can see it. And then the second part is believe it. Like, that's where I think that's the hardest part. I think people are very good at vision boards and like saving posts on Instagram of like pictures of their favorite houses and whatever. Like that's cool. But do you actually believe that you can achieve that? And it doesn't have to be material stuff, right? We're just using that example because I think everybody can relate. But I like to go and actually reverse engineer stuff. I'm like, what would it take for me to acquire like a $1.5 million home? Okay, well, like what's the loan amount? You know what I mean? Like what's the monthly payment? Let me put the taxes in there. Let me figure out all the numbers. And it's like, all right, this is what's going to take every single month and a down payment. All right, how much value do I have to create? How many websites do I have to sell? You know what I mean? Like I reverse engineer the whole thing and say like, what do I actually have to do to achieve this? Can I do it? Yes, I can. And it's laid out in front of me and I can start to, eat an elephant one bite at a time. And I just agree with you that people probably don't take those extra steps or next steps. It's like, I'm going to have $1 million house. It's like, all right, just saying it's not going to make it happen.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I do this activity with my clients that I have them close their eyes and I ask them a bunch of questions of like imagining that they are 5 years from now. What does their life look like? What does it feel like? What are their relationships feel like? What does their house look like? What's in their closet? How much money do they make? And I just have them say the first thing that comes to their mind. And then when the exercise is over, I ask them, okay, what's stopping you from being this person now? And they, list a whole list of reasons. And then I say, no, you are this person. You just haven't put any action to becoming this person yet. Like all of it's already inside you. And so you have to imagine, what does it feel like? That's the most important question in the exercise, is to close your eyes and actually ask yourself, what does it feel like to live with a person who has flourishing relationships with like amazing people? What does it feel? What does that person do every day? How do they steward their relationships? What does it feel like to have the house of your dreams? How do you take care of it? Well, start taking care of your house now that way, so that when you move into the $8 million house, you already have the habits and you already are intentional in those ways. And so I think it's the feel part. I think it's the dream and the feel part, like you said, that makes it really important. But when people have limiting beliefs, a lot of the I'm not enough statements kind of prevent them from being able to see those things clearly. So they have to do the work to clear out their lenses so that they can start to visualize. People who don't have hope, people who have lots of shame statements rolling around in their heads a lot, they don't even have the imagination to come up with, what does it feel like to be that person? And so I would say that's the first step. And then once you can get rid of some of those, those filters on your lenses and you start to see clearly, then you can actually, like you said, reverse engineer it. What is it going to take? How much money do I have to make? How am I going to make that money to get to where I want to go? Or whatever it is. What needs to change in me in order to be able to have the healthy relationship that I want to have? What is that going to take? How much money do I need to lay out to a counselor? All those things. I think, the part that most people are missing is the goal setting part. And the goal setting part is what you said, Fenton, the reverse engineering and the action steps, the small, achievable goals. What's that thing called people use? Smart?
Yeah.
Small, measurable, achievable. I don't remember where the R and the T are, but.
Repeatable? I don't know. Rotund? I forget, but
when you have your clients set goals, are you having them write it down, just speak it out? And is it an ongoing assignment, an ongoing exercise? Because if people don't do this on a regular basis, look, I try to write in my journal every day. I don't get a chance to, but Fenton and I have always talked about this. Actually, journaling is a big thing because you get to put pen to pad what your thought process. And if you're not putting a plan out, look, write your plan in pencil. You can erase as you go. But if you're not writing a plan to reach your goal, where are you actually headed? So when you speak to your clients, are you having them journal, or are you suggesting to them they should journal only because maybe they can see in front of them? Because people's thoughts can be jumbled. You wake up in the morning, especially if you have kids, if you have different responsibilities, just taking care of someone in your family, whatever it may be, you may forget to do these things, or you may forget that, today is the day I do this, or this is the next step in my journey. How are you making your clients remember to follow through with what they've promised themselves?
Yeah, I mean, the mirror is my job. The work is their job. So I do give a lot of homework in my sessions. But the truth is, what I've learned over years, for a little while, I had an organization kind of like scholarshiping sessions, like, oh, this person really needs a session. We're going to pay for their session. And I actually had to ask them to stop doing it at some point, because I was like, this isn't valuable, because these people aren't invested in their process. And I think that's true with, like, if you're going to come to a session and then not do your homework, you're wasting your money, not mine. I still have the same amount of money at the end of the session.
That's what my piano teacher used to say. It's like, you didn't practice? I'm still going to take your money.
Right. For real. So, after that particular exercise, their job is to spend 5 or 10 minutes every day reading through that 5 years from now avatar of themselves, so to speak, and then visualize it, feel it, allow your body to feel what it feels like, allow your mind to go to those places. And then whatever you come up with in those 5 or 10 minutes, you write down. And some of them should be actionable steps. And if they're not actionable steps, then I can help them create actionable steps from those ideas. But there's a high level of accountability, but like if somebody doesn't do it, the only thing I can do is reflect back to them. Why didn't you do it? A lot of people don't follow through. They say stuff like they don't have time. They forgot. They got wrapped up in something else. But at the end of the day, if it is a priority to you, you'll do it. Like when I was going through my own emotional health journey, it felt like life or death to me. So I was at it all day, every day, because I knew if I didn't, I was going to keep living the way I was living. And I hated the way I was living. So I think, it's just a whether or not it's a priority. And it's also whether or not you believe it's possible. So a lot of people procrastinate, or we'll call them procrastinators. We'll call them lazy. We'll call them avoidant. But the truth is that procrastination comes from pain. It comes from fear. So it's usually rooted in a fear that I'm never going to achieve it, that I'm never going to be enough. And again, that's a shame statement. And so then they try to achieve it, but still coming from that place of shame. And when it doesn't work out, they're like, see, I knew I couldn't do it. And so it really is about what we think and what we believe at the end of the day. And a lot of people are trying to achieve success by, again, what the love that we received when we were children is the love that we give ourselves in adulthood. So if our parents didn't believe in us, didn't affirm us, didn't tell us we were enough, didn't tell us that we had value or purpose, then when we grow up, that's how we're going to talk to ourselves internally, because that's the belief system we have. And so we have to change that belief system in order to be able to free ourselves from that shame cycling and start to be able to visualize these things.
Well said.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
I was going to go on record and say this conversation could go on way, way, way longer. And we should definitely do a part 2 if you're down.
Yeah.
Because we barely just kind of scratched the surface. And I think there's so much helpful stuff in here and so much more helpful stuff to be said. So that being said, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you online?
Yeah. I just signed up for TikTok.
Right.
I just signed up for TikTok, so there's nothing on there yet. It's everything's under my first and last name, so it's Kiele Hauser, KIELEHAUSER. You can find me on Instagram. There's a few videos on there as well. And yeah, those are the best ways. I don't know that you can find anything about me on TikTok. I don't even have a picture up there yet. I feel like I just stepped onto the dark side and I don't really know what to expect yet. But in the near future,
Get out.
There will be content there, I promise. Hi, Bella.
And with that being said, also follow her at Kiele Hauser on Instagram. And we'll post your links in the description when this goes live very soon. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you again. It was a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Oh my gosh, it was such a pleasure for me. I'm happy to do it anytime. Of course, Fenton and I, we have these conversations just like over text message very often. So sometimes we're like, we probably should record this because this is good stuff. So.
That's how we got here, man. That's how we have this podcast. So we're just keeping it going. All right, y'all. Please share this with somebody else on their personal development journey. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.